Anne Arundel County Association of Realtors thanks you for your participation in this meeting. As a reminder, all association conferences, meetings, continuing education classes, or any other professional or social gathering must be conducted in full compliance with federal and state antitrust laws. Discussion on any topic suggesting an intent to restrict competition or fix prices is improper. These discussions and topics include individual company policies, pricing, business and customer strategies and practices, including commission amounts or splits. If inappropriate discussions occur at any association meeting, continuing education class, or any other professional or social gathering, all members present must openly disassociate themselves from such discussions. The instructor or chairman must make every effort to immediately end any such discussions. If such discussions occur at an informal or social gathering, please bring it to the immediate attention of the association staff.
Please note that the views, opinions, and information shared during this presentation are those of the presenters and not necessarily reflect the views of Anne Arundel County Association of Realtors. AACAR has not reviewed, edited, verified, or approved the content of this program and is not responsible for the accuracy or completeness of the information presented. Please use your own personal judgment and consult appropriate advisors if needed. And what I appreciate most is that we are, yes, we are colleagues, and sometimes we're representing the opposite side of a transaction. But when we share our information and our experience, I think we all gain and we all are stronger. So that's my thank you to anyone that shares when we are in this environment. And a big thank you, Sandra, for this morning. So you have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about multiple offers, and I know that can be a very frightening thing. And I always do spreadsheets. Makes me a little crazy. So you're going to share your screen and take it from here. Is that correct?
Yes. Hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yes, your screen is showing. I'm going to monitor, and anybody else here, please feel free to monitor the chat and make it interactive. If you have questions, let's all walk away having learned several new things today. And yeah. Again, thank you. And Sandra, it's all yours.
Yeah, I think what's so lovely about real estate is that we all come from various different backgrounds and different types of businesses, nurses, teachers, the gamut. And it's such an interesting business with that respect because we learn so much from each other. And so my background was in mortgage banking, and I happened to work for a company that, I was just an employee, but I worked for a company that there must have been some shady things going on, or at least claims of something going on. And we had what was called the suits. And that was when the regulators came in, just walked in, and they would take all of your files because there was some sort of a claim against that somebody did something wrong. And so I learned in my early 20s that it was critical to document everything. And this is a time where we really, computer usage was, on the forefront, but we were still primarily, most businesses were paper. And so that was my background. And working from various mortgage companies, I knew that I just had to be able to defend my position. And so getting into real estate, I've always been sort of a paperwork and making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed type of person. And now that I am a team leader, and as many of you, like Melanie, know, being in managers, is that you're responsible for any licensees that's under you, anything that they do wrong. So that's where my background comes in. And then personally, I just, with my career, I've had a couple of things that have happened to me that have sort of checked my system. I've been in front of two different attorneys and presenting in person, not over computer, but in person, where you have two attorneys that have that are representing a buyer, or a husband and a wife and that type of thing. So just over the years, I've been able to come together with a system that lets me sleep at night. So that's what I'm going to share with you all today. So what we're going to go over is step by step, and a lot of people here I see are incredibly experienced, have probably been selling real estate longer than me. But I think it's always a good idea to see what other people do, just to see if there's something in your business that might spur you to make a change. So we're going to talk about what to do when an offer comes in, how to communicate with the seller and other agents, how to document your work. I'll show you my Google Sheet, and most importantly, what to say to keep your conversations compliant with the law, and how to best represent your seller and maintain professionalism. Just last night, I was representing a buyer, and I got that dreaded phone call that they went with the other offer. And we hate that. We've all been on that receiving line. And I think that that is part of handling multiple offers, is how you're handling yourself as a professional, because I think it's appreciated. So my first system comes into place that as soon as I get the offer, and many agents will call and they say, do you have a deadline? And I don't even have an offer. Why would I set a deadline, right? The seller doesn't know to even set a deadline. You need to have that conversation. So when someone asks me, when will you be presenting offers? And I say, immediately. This is not the time to I've heard of agents, they say, well, I'm going to hold all the offers and present it to the seller at one time. No, that is not appropriate. Your job is not to dictate when the offer is to be presented. Your job is you get the offer, you give it to the seller. It's up to the seller how they want to handle it. The seller may say, this is good. I'm done with showings. I want to take this offer. That's up to the seller. It's not up to us. So when I email it, I change the subject line to receipt. I acknowledge receipt to the agent. Thank you. I am in receipt of your offer. I always CC myself, and I say thank you. I will present it to the seller immediately, and I will be in touch when I have a response. Then I look it over. Initially, just a quick review of what the terms are. Oftentimes, the agent will summarize what the terms are. It makes it easy for you. And then I send it to the sellers, both of them, if there's multiple. I change the subject line to presentation. Dear Mr. Seller, attached, please find an offer on your property. The agent has summarized the terms below. I will be reaching out to speak to you regarding how you would like to handle this, right? And then you're going to call the seller, text them, however they want you to show up for them, and talk to them about how they want to handle this, right? Because at this point in time, you might have other agents that have said, we're going to put in an offer, we might put in an offer, et cetera. So you have that conversation. So then what I do with that document is I use Dotloop. That's just what I prefer. I will send it to my Dotloop account, and I will put it in a folder that says offer one. And then I use Outlook for my email, and I have all of my active listings with sellers, with the property address, with the seller name, and then I will make subfolders that say offer one, offer two, offer three. And sometimes if it gets really confusing, I'll put the first name of the agent that I'm talking to, Matt, Melanie, whatever it is, so I can keep it straight with what agent that I'm speaking with. But it can be a lot. We probably have all had, or many of us have had the good fortune of having 7 or 10 offers, even more, during the height of the market. So I think that that is just a really good way to keep it together. If you're presenting in person, because, I have some clients that are not computer literate, then, I'm copying or I'm printing out all of the contracts, not just the cover page, but the entirety of the offer. It's very important every single page gets presented. So the next
Well,
thing that
I already learned something, Sandra, because I've never changed the subject line. Never. So I will begin to do that. Thank you.
great.
I already started that.
So you may be getting phone calls from agents, you may be getting text messages. I always follow up if it's important information where I've had a conversation with my client. I'm always following up in email. Some of you, I've been on the professional standards committee, and it's really all about documentation, right? It's about documentation. If you have a claim against you, you want to be able to have a file and say, this is exactly what happened on this day of the occurrence. Maybe the person that is saying that you did something wrong, they don't really even have any proof. They just think that you did something wrong. But if you have to go in and um, defend yourself about that, if you have these incredible file systems, it's going to be really hard for someone to say that I didn't present their offer, right? I've got the documentation. So, there have been agents out there that they have had claims from their client to the Maryland Real Estate Commission that they didn't present the offer, right? It's hard to say that you didn't present the offer when you have all this documentation. So the next thing that I do is I want to know the details of the offer. And sometimes this can be very fast moving. To me, I need to have it on my spreadsheet. My spreadsheet is, sometimes I change it because if it's an FHA with a lower sales price, or if it's something with like an escalation, which you can easily do. You can use this if anybody wants mine. I'm showing you my exact offer comparison master. And so what I do is I have this in my drive, and then I just go in and I just say make a copy, and then I make it I make it specific for the property address. And so here you see I have buyer paid closing costs, seller paid contribution request, right? So this would be if the buyer wants the seller to pay 6% of their closing costs. You can also go in, and this is always really confusing, but you can say escalation, yes or no. You can change your spreadsheet to be applicable to your offer. And so I will do, I've got agent, and then that's how I know what the terms are. I go down here and I answer all of these questions because these are the main parts of the offer. And then I even have miscellaneous inspections, post occupancies, yes or no, additional terms. I do find that when you are having escalation, it does change as you're going through and presenting it, right? Because if you have another offer that's $10,000 over this, it kind of changes things so that you can go back and show how that affects the price as you're presenting these offers, and sellers get very, very confused. So I find that if they have Gmail, it helps because they can see in live time on their screen. But sometimes you may have to print this out or save it as a PDF and just email it to them. It really just depends on your seller's capability and what documents that they use. So let's see, I have to go back to my screen. All right, so the next part that I do, and I think I would have to say that I don't think a lot of agents do this. I just see it on my end. I'll ask if I'm representing the buyer, I'll ask the lender, did the agent call you? Have you had any communication? What type of thing? And with my background in mortgage banking, a lot of us see like they submitted a lender letter. The lender said, yes, they're approved, no problem. But we've all had those times where you're 2 days before closing, and guess what? The loan's not approved. So to me, that is a really big part of your presentation. If you have somebody that's putting 50% down, with a lower price point, and they don't have an appraisal contingency versus somebody that maybe is only putting 5% down, that has an impact on the deal. That has an impact on the risk associated, because what we're trying to do is help the seller understand that it's not just about the price. It's about the terms. It's about the risks associated with that deal falling apart. Does it have a 21-day home inspection contingency timeline? Why on earth would a seller take their house off the market for 21 days for the buyer to do their due diligence? So it's our responsibility to talk about our war stories, to show them these are the potential problems that could go on, and how are we helping to mitigate the potential with a problem. So the first thing that I do when I know that I am going to be presenting either it's one offer, 10 offers, is I'm looking at their ability to purchase the property, right? So my first step is I am calling the lender. The lender, I may know, I may have a good working relationship. It might be somebody that I personally would use, but often it's not. I just talked to a lender the other day and they're in New Jersey. So I may not be familiar with that person. I may not know what's going on. So we have to be very careful. We can't call up and say, well, where do they work and what do they do? And that is a violation. Source of income is a protected class. Those are not things we can ask. Yeah, as you know, sellers say, well, do they have any kids? Do they have a family? That's not relevant. It is not relevant to the conversation. And so we have to be careful how we're vetting the lender. We have to be careful about what we say. And the information that we're providing to our client has to be compliant and not be against any sort of a fair housing issues. So when I'm vetting the lender, I am asking, hello, hi, this is Sandra. We haven't had the chance to work together, and I'm the listing agent for 123 Main Street, and I'm just calling to do my due diligence on behalf of the seller. And so if you could tell me a little bit about your company and how you work, right? Because what I'm trying to find out is this just one lone person that's sitting in his house in Michigan and he works with 20 different banks out there and has no control over the process, right? Because he's going to be submitting it. That is, to me, like, I need to know about that, right? What happens behind the scene? Do they have processing? Is it in-house? Do they all come to an office, or are they all working remotely across the country? Who is underwriting? Are they underwriting in-house, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're with ABC Mortgage and that person doesn't have the ability to have a connection with his processor, have a connection with his underwriter where he has some say, any of these big mortgage companies around here, I won't say any names, but they're big companies, and these guys or these gals bring in a lot of business, and they can have direct contact with the underwriter to say, hey, can you take a look at this file? And so it's all mortgage lenders are not the same. And so you need to understand how they operate, right? And so none of those are fair housing. You're just trying to find out how they do business. So the next question I ask is, how long have you worked with this buyer? Because I want to know, did they just do a pre-approval that day, or have these people been shopping for a house for 9 months? And so I always love it when I say, oh, you know what? I'm their family loan officer, and this is their third transaction. These people are so lovely. They get me the documents quickly. They've already gotten me everything that I need, right? And so the next question I ask is, have you verified the down payment and closing costs? Do they have the assets? Have they been verified? I want to know, do they have that documentation? The next question you have to ask very carefully. I say, do you have all the documentation that you need to ascertain their income, right? That is a really important question, because what I'm looking for, and I can't ask it specifically and they can't answer it that way, but what I want to know is, do they have their tax returns? Because if this is a self-employed individual, they might tell the loan officer, I make $300,000, but as all self-employed people, we know that there's a bottom line, right? And so the next question I ask is, how many days will it take you to get full commitment? Because if your offer says they're going to get approval in 7 days, and the loan officer you're talking to says, I need a month, we have a disconnect there. So that needs to be a conversation with the agent. The other question I ask is, do you have an appraisal waiver? Is there a possibility of this? And then the final question I ask is, do you anticipate any problems getting these buyers to the settlement table, right? And then in my mind, based off of that conversation, I'm sort of giving it a rating. Is it a 10? Is it a 6? Is it an 8? How do I feel about that, right? Um, and so when I'm talking to my client, that's important information, right? Not what they do for a living, not that they've worked for their job for 10 years. That's not a discussion that we're going to have. Any questions about that?
No, we do have several mortgage folks on. So,
Yes, I see Ann. Hi, Ann. She's wonderful.
and Jody and
Oh, hi, Jody. Okay.
and I
So,
think Kim's on. So we do have quite a few.
right.
I
All
have
really good people.
I do
Okay.
have a question just in terms of best practices.
Mhm.
It was suggested to me once that an agent gets all of this stuff in writing. So they have these questions already prepared and they just send the email off to the lender for the lender to respond in writing. Do you find any benefit of doing that versus just a telephone conversation? I feel like a telephone conversation still kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea.
Quite frankly, I don't do that, Molly, because this is a recorded video, but oftentimes the loan officer will tell me what their credit rating is. And that's not something I'm going to ask, and it's not necessarily something that they answer, but it might be information that's something that I want to have, right? So I don't do that. I will occasionally, if I know that I'm competing and I'm representing the buyer, often what I will do is I will copy, if my client approves this, I will copy the lender on the email so that the lender knows that the offer was submitted, that the lender can reach out to the agent in case this is not part of their process. I see Betsy's got her hand.
Betsy has her hand up.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for all your experience. So the phone call, I do phone calls to the lender, and I find if I just ask open-ended questions, I mean, I have a list of questions that I ask, and I'm going to add several of the ones that Sandra has provided to us. But if asking an open-ended questions, I find that lenders really just want to promote their client. So you do get more information than you would have maybe even had to ask for. That's all I
Yeah,
want to say.
exactly. I mean, I had a lender tell me once, oh my gosh, the parents are so happy that they finally found a good house because they've had 4 homes they've had to cancel on because of the home inspection. Is that important information to know? Yeah, it kind of is. So yes, that's great. And we all, handle it the way that we think is best. So what do you do when a second offer comes in? I think this is really important because the Code of Ethics says that we have to treat all parties fairly and honestly. And I have heard from agents that they've been representing buyers and that listing agent did not tell them there was another offer that comes in. That's a big problem. So the first offer that comes in, the agent might have said, do you have any offers in hand? No, I don't. The property is fully available. And of course, we all know that this depends on if you have the ability to answer that question, right? Because your answer may be, I don't have the ability to answer that question, right? And in that case, nobody knows that they're competing with somebody else, but everybody has the same information. But if your seller does want you to and has given you permission in writing to answer this question, when that second offer, third, fourth, what have you, it gets a little crazy because you might be calling people. You might have a deadline that you're trying to meet. It can be a little hectic, and that's where you really just have to calm down and take your notes. I've talked to offer one, I've talked to offer two, I've talked to offer three, I've emailed. I personally think that when it's a quick thing, I'll send a text. It really depends on my relationship with the agent, whether I know them or not, how I respond to them. But I go down the list to say, like, hey, just want to let you know we have another offer in. We have a total of 6 offers. I know that some people like to just do a blanket showing announcements to say, we have multiple offers and I will be presenting at such a time and such a date. It might be easier to do that. It really just depends on you and how you want to handle it, as long as you're treating everybody fairly and honestly. Everyone needs to have the same information. So presenting to the seller. I think that most people, if a seller has an offer in hand, most of the time, not all of the time, the seller will say, well, I want to wait until the second offer comes in to make my decision, right? But it might be such a good offer that, and they have a deadline of 6 p.m. It really just depends. So you're going to have to make that decision. What's happening, or not make the decision, but the seller's going to have to make the decision of how they want that handled, right? It might be easier for you to go over the offers, all of them at one time, but just remember that you must present them immediately. You should not be holding offers. That's not our job to make that decision. It's up to the seller. So we've already talked about sharing the sheet and that sort of thing. So this to me is really important because it happens to me almost every single time that I'm presenting an offer. The sellers, you're friendly, maybe they're your good friends, maybe it's family, maybe you've worked with them, for 30 years, but oftentimes they want to get personal, right? It's their house, they're emotional about it. Maybe they say, oh, we'd love for, a nice blah, blah, blah. No, you cannot be a party of that. And so I always start the conversation out to set what the expectations. Okay, thank you for making this time together with me, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Today we're going to be going over the offer, and we are going to be talking about the merits of offers, what the price is, etc. I tell you today that we will not be talking about anything personal because it's not applicable to this conversation. And then if they say, oh, I saw on the Ring camera, I do not want to have that conversation. I've heard, I looked them up on Facebook. No, absolutely not. This is not the time to be polite and let them finish the sentence. Immediately, I say, I'm going to stop you there. We are not going to talk about anything that could be a potential fair housing violation, anything personal. You and your spouse, if you want to have that conversation, but I'm not going to be a party to it, right? And you sort of know those type of clients that are maybe, emotional, or they might be more business minded. But it's your job right then and there to stop that and not be a party of it, right? So we've all had those situations, and that's where it's really critical for you to make sure that you're running that conversation. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay.
Hey, Sandra, can I ask a question? Sorry.
Sure.
So I'm just curious. Sometimes I get calls and I'm just wondering what everybody's take is on this, where the agent will call me as a lender and say, do the buyers have the funds to do an appraisal gap, or do the buyers really need this much seller assistance for their closing cost? It gets
That's
into
not a question you should be answering.
Okay.
In my opinion, it's not.
Yeah.
I would say I have their offer in front of me. And yes, I verified the assets. I was able to write this letter, and I would keep it to that.
Yeah, I usually push them back to the agent, right? The buyer's agent, just to kind of
Yeah.
keep that line in the sand.
I
But
would say my role here is not to negotiate the offer. It's not my role
Mhm.
here. You have to talk to
Got
the
it.
agent about that.
Got it.
Okay. So let's see. Oh, I want to get back to these comments because this is really important. One day I was driving to the beach with my family and I got a phone call from my office manager and I was like, I'm driving to the beach. Next thing you know, I get a phone call from the company's attorney.
Mhm.
And let's just say that she and I were not friends the way she came at me. But what had happened was there was a buyer who reached out to um, the real estate company and they said, Sandra Libby is um, there's a claim against me that there was a fair housing violation, right? So of course the attorney's like, oh my gosh, right? And so at the time when I got that phone call, I was like, I'm not worried about it, right? Somebody's going after my character. I really wasn't that concerned about it. I'm heading to the beach. And so I said to the attorney, um, I'm not concerned about it because I have these systems, right? I know that I've done everything the way that I should, right? And that's why, but the attorney doesn't know me. She doesn't know my systems, etc. And what turned out was that I had a couple of listings in the same area and the same buyer put an offer on one house, didn't get it, put an offer in on another house and didn't get it. And so they felt that maybe there was something about them personally that it was me keeping them from that. Really, what it was that the other people, their offer was much higher, but there was a scary part for the company that maybe I had done something wrong, right? And so that's where this comes from. If you keep your business compliant, then if you get that phone call, you don't have to worry about it. We all can't keep we don't have control over what people think about us, but we can know who we are and we can keep our business compliant. And so when I'm giving you this information, if you're not a paperwork person, or if you think like this is just too much, it's let me tell you something. You have something like that comes at you, you are really glad that you have good systems in place. Okay, so deciding and closing the loop. This is my system that I use, and it's helpful because it can be really overwhelming to a seller. They're just like looking at all this documents. They have no idea. Their eyes are just so wide. And so what I try to do is like the process of elimination, right? And so as we're going through the offer sheet. So as you're going through your offer sheet and you are going through these things, say something is like, say you have like a $900,000 offer and it's contingent upon a home sale, right? You immediately, probably the seller can just say like, yeah, that's a no, right? And so I just use this system when I'm going through my Google sheet to sort of help them. And so as you see is that if you've got 10 offers here and you're going through and you're looking at the terms, et cetera, maybe this person's, offering $300,000 lower than one of the other offers. It's pretty easy for the seller to say that's a no. Like, I'm not going to be taking that offer. And so I try to start with the reds first. It's an immediate no. Terms don't work for the seller. So maybe that offer is the only offer that you have, but it's an immediate no. That's a red, right? We can cross them out. And then maybe somebody's agreeing, like it's $100,000 over and they're cash. There's no contingencies, nothing at all. They're going to settle next week and give you a free post occupancy for 2 months. The seller might be like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So maybe that's potentially, a green. And then yellow is like a maybe. this, it appears pretty solid offer. And so I really try to break it down to get the reds out, and just be like, okay, these are a no, these are a maybe. Maybe I have like start out with 3 or 4 maybes. Maybe it's just 2 maybes, maybe it's 2 greens. And then we're shrinking basically the offers into which they want to consider. And we're looking at things like, okay, well, this is a higher offer, but there's no home inspection contingency. This is a lower offer. And looking at all of those details, it's a little bit easier just for the seller to digest. So once you've gotten to that point where you have maybe the basis, and the seller says, let's work with this first offer, right? And that's really, up to your client. It's really up to you how you handle and how you negotiate. I'm not here to tell you how to negotiate. You guys could probably, we could all teach each other a few things. But typically what I do is I pick kind of the first, second, we go through that, and that first offer, and maybe like the second, sometimes it's been the third, sort of like you're still here on the shelf. You haven't been knocked off yet. And so I will talk to, maybe there might be some negotiation where you're saying this offer looks good, but maybe there might be some terms, a settlement date or something like that. While we're waiting to hear back, and maybe you might be in active negotiations with that first property, I will go ahead and let the other agents know that their offer didn't get accepted, right? If I have permission from the seller to release them, I'll let them know. Most of the time, I think that your first priority is to get it under contract, make sure that you're doing what your seller wants you to do and how to handle it. So I have here first choice in active negotiation. The second choice is I keep warm until the first choice is confirmed, because I've had it before where that first choice, they've pulled out at the last minute. They can't handle the buyer can't handle the stress of waiting, and they've just completely backed out. And so you don't want to have nothing on the table. So that, and you probably all maybe have done this too.
Hey,
So.
Sandra.
Mm-hmm.
It's Trish. Hi.
Hi, Trish.
I really like your red, yellow, green way that you do that. I guess my question is, do you put the red, yellow, green prior to presenting to the seller, or does the seller put the red, yellow, green on each offer?
That's a great question. No, I do not, because remember, we don't want to make decisions for our client. It's up to them. And to me, if you're saying it's a red, they're not looking at it. So that could be interfering with your presentation of the offer. If they tell me it's a red, then that's what I do. But I don't make that decision until they've, had a conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Yep.
Absolutely.
Sandra, we have about 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay. I better hurry it up. All right. Notifying agents who didn't win. I think this is really important for professionalism, is to how you respond to them, how you treat them, right? Let's not be changing just the status to under contract in the multiple list. That's just not the way to handle it. So this is what I say. I'm always appreciative. Thank them for their time. So just the paper trail, I want to go over that after presenting the offer to the seller, if they've rejected it, I send it into Dotloop and I put a little text there, presented and rejected on this date, and I have my client initial it. If it's in person, I have them initial it. That's my documentation that they received the offer and they rejected it. So how do you, handle multiple offers? Sometimes if it's crazy and the showings are coming on, I've talked to the seller to say, like, would you be okay with me putting it in temporary off status, right? Because I think that's another thing that's rude, is if you're in active negotiations and agents are still showing it and the seller has said, I've got a good offer and you're negotiating. So sometimes, I'll do that. And sometimes I've called an agent and said, hey, the seller's chosen to work with another offer. I'm so sorry. Guess what? They've come back and increased their offer, and it turns out they're the top spot. So one things that that just as a follow-up, are you ready if the Maryland Real Estate Commission gets a complaint that you didn't submit somebody's offer, right? And so having your paperwork, and I don't know that a lot of people do this, but I have my seller reject the offer and initial it. So let's see. Are you ready if someone makes a fair housing claim against you, right? And so you want to make sure that you are compliant. You can't control other people. You can just control what you do. So anyway, clients come and go. We all have to work together, and let's make sure that we are being professional and treating people the way that we want to be treated. So thank you all.
Thank you. I have 2 stars and I will be following them. Thank you very much. So I appreciate it. Anyone have any more questions for Sandra?
I do. I have a quick question. We talked about when you're working with more than, offer number 1 and offer number 2, keeping offer number 2 warm. What are some of the things that you say to that agent to keep them warm? Because I know that they're always rushing us to respond and give them an answer. And so what do you usually say?
Well, I try to be very quick with presentations. I've had sellers say, well, I don't want to look anything until next Sunday. I'm like, oh my gosh, no. But I really just say that the seller is doing exactly what they're doing, and that is they are considering the offer. You don't have to give, well, we're going back to offer 1 with no, that's not really relevant. What's relevant is that the seller is considering, and once they've made a decision, I will let you know. So that's what I mean by kind of putting it on the back burner. If something happens to the first offer, maybe have no inspection contingencies, it's a great offer except for price. You might be going back and saying, hey, the seller likes your terms, but the price isn't there. Would your client do X? That's typically what I'll do is suggest to the seller that terms are really key, and maybe the buyer would come up on price. And if they don't, then maybe offer 2 is what the seller wants to go with.
Okay. Any other questions for Sandra? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And
My pleasure.
I found it very helpful to follow the slides. It made my notes easier. So thank you for that. I wanted to say that next week it's going to be an AI overview and which is the best. So I'm very interested to hear that, the highs and lows of each. And then I wanted to let everyone know that on the 16th, that's next Thursday, Noah K is going to be doing in person at AACAR, the heart of the deal. And Noah speaks from the heart. So he is going to talk about how to help understand that personal side of a transaction, the emotional side, and how to read it and how to meet agents, how to meet your clients where they are. So that'll be, again, in person next Thursday. I think I'm going to pick up some cookies, lemonade, and iced tea from Chick-fil-A. Might be my favorite, but to share with everybody that shows up. So again, at AACAR. Thank you all for being here today. Again, thank you, Sandra, very much. And have a great day. We try to do this early on a Saturday so that we can go out and have our showings and open houses,
Thank you,
right?
Sandra.
So take
Thanks,
care,
guys.
everybody.
Have a great week.
My pleasure.